Hello and welcome to Tommy's Game Table. My name's Tommy and today we've got our very special guest, Julian.
Hey guys, how are ya? I'm really happy to be here.
And today we're actually going to be making our very first ever character. So let's get straight into it.
Hell yeah.
First of all, basically what we want to be doing is rolling for our stats.
Yeah.
So Julian, do you want to talk a little bit more about what those stats might be and why they're relevant to our character?
Yeah, right. So the way you interact with the world in DnD is predicated on 6 different statistics that your character's made up of. 3 of them physical, 3 of them are mental. So you've got strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. That's the 6. We roll stats to determine how strong they are and how you use those in combat and in roleplay.
Well, without any further ado, let's roll some dice.
Cool.
Hell yeah. Alrighty, so when you're going to be going for your stats, there's a few different ways of doing it. You've got a system called Standard Array, which is where you get a 15, 14, a 13, a 12, a 10, and an 8, and you get to choose where you're going to put those stats. There's also a point buy system, and what's the point buy system, Julian?
It's basically 27 points. You get to delineate those points in any of your ability scores.
If you're new to the game, the point buy system can be a little bit convoluted, so we'll put a little graph up there so you can see exactly how to do that if that's the way you want to do it. But with playing any kind of tabletop games, the main whole thing of the game is rolling dice. So we're going to go the old school way and just roll dice.
So we'll be rolling 4d6, and we'll be dropping the lowest. Those 3 d6 that are left will be added together and added into one of our ability scores.
Hell yeah, and then we choose which of those scores go into each of our stats.
Yeah.
Some people like to do it so if you're rolling strength first, that's what your strength score is going to be, then your dexterity and so on. But today we're going to keep it a little bit more loose, make it a little bit more flavorful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going for a specific type of character, so we want to make sure that those attributes are good for that character.
100%, and we'll get into what that specific character is in one moment. Alrighty, so our first roll, we're going to take away our lowest dice, so we've got 2 3s and a 6, and take away that 2, and that gives us a 12. Alrighty, and then our next one, oh, not that great.
Low scores are great.
So a 6 on our second one, so we're going to have a dump stat there at least. That's a little bit better. We've got 4 and 4 is 8, 11, and 16.
16 solid, big high number.
Hell yeah, we're going to need those for those few low ones. This is 13. And is this the last one?
Yeah, this is the last one.
Last one. 14.
14.
Not bad.
Alright, our spread is 12, 6, 11, 16, 13, and 14.
That's a pretty well-rounded character. I think I'll be able to make something pretty cool with that.
I think so.
So basically what we've decided to do to keep things nice and simple is we're going to go through just classes and races off the player's handbook. And we're just going to go through pretty much chronologically is what they've got in the book.
Yep.
So our first race in the book is the dwarf. And what's going to be our first class?
It's the barbarian.
Hey!
Yeah.
So that'll be cool. So we're going to make a dwarf barbarian.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our character sheet here and we're going to pop those into our class. We're going to start at level 1 and we're also going to have our race here just below that. So we're going to pop that in real quick. So there we have it. We've got a barbarian at level 1 and he's a dwarf. Beautiful. So now we're going to be moving on to, I guess we're going to come up with a bit of a name.
Yeah, name.
Yeah.
Flesh out the rest of the character concept.
Come up with a bit of an idea. So who is this barbarian dwarf? What do you think we should call him?
I was thinking something nice and like earthy. A lot of R's, a lot of G's.
Yeah. Anything related to like basically stones or beer, I think are really good for dwarves.
Yeah, it's like deep in the wilderness, top, like, Northern Europe, somewhere like that. Where they come from,
Nordic sounding things.
Yeah. Let's go with Rorgrin.
Rorgrin, how would you spell that?
Rorgrin. Simple, they're dwarves.
Hell yeah. Rorgrin, and maybe something to do with smithing or ale or...
Yeah. Alesmith.
Alesmith. How good's that? That'll do.
Sounds good. It's sometimes the best ideas are right in front of you.
Yeah. So we're going to write that on our actual character sheet now that we've got a bit of a working name. Mm-hmm. So Rorgrin Alesmith. What a great name.
Probably a brewer, I assume.
Of some kind, hey. And maybe he even smiths tankarts or... He might be actually the guy who makes all the different accessories for drinking.
Yeah, right.
When he's not drinking himself.
Yeah.
But drink responsibly, kids. Or if you're a kid, don't drink at all.
Maybe just play D&D,
yeah. So you'll see up in this little box that we're filling out, we've got our character name, which is the first thing that we're seeing. We've got our class, race, and level. And you'll see the next one along here is our background. So if you go to your player's handbook, there's actually a whole section here for backgrounds. Let's have a bit of a look.
This will flesh out the last little kind of quarter of our character concept design. Basically it tells you where your character's from, what he's doing, gives you a little bit of starting gear, and gives him some bonuses.
More flavor.
More flavor.
So background starts on page 125 of the player's handbook. And we won't read out all of the different ones. If you've got a copy of the player's handbook or you found one on Google or PDF or something that you're looking at, you'll be able to find all the different ones. You've got acolytes and criminals and guild artisans, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to work out something that I reckon will probably best suit our friend Rorgrin here.
Yeah.
You can, they call it basically min-maxing, so if you want to make a character that's optimal for whatever class that you're going to be making or the character that you have in mind, feel free to do that. We, as players, I think like to play with a lot of flavour, and sometimes the more negatives you have in your character actually adds for more role-playing opportunities.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what we can do with that -2 or that 6 that we've rolled. That's fantastic.
He's going to be either very unlikable or not the smartest cookie or...
Fantastic, can't wait.
So we've decided to go with a guild artisan.
So, guild artisan, you're a member of an artisans guild, you're skilled in various different functions, it's based on your culture, your society. Your general goal is to fit into the group, you're an adage to an adventurer, you're a member of some wider group, shop, community, something like that, and you're probably well known, reasonably wealthy, that kind of thing. Yeah, you know, you're like the upper echelon of the group.
Yeah, got some good networks, maybe in a few different sort of towns and cities and stuff like that. And as we're sort of coming up with this character concept, we had a bit of a laugh of his last name with Alesmith, and we're thinking that he might make ornate tankards and drinking mugs and stuff. Yeah. So that might be his sort of guild artisan sort of craft and skill that he has. So going back to our character sheet, where it says backgrounds just over here, we're just going to pop in guild artisan.
I like the idea of there being basically a guild that likes to present itself as well-to-do, and they're basically just all drunks.
Yes, I love that idea. They still think they're a little bit better than everyone.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And player name, obviously that's a little bit of a given. You just pop your own name in there. So for today's video, we're not going to worry about that one. Yep. This is just a concept character that we might even end up using in a game one day. You'll just have to wait and see. Stay tuned. So coming back down here, we've got our race, which we've already decided on, which is a dwarf. And coming across, now we have alignment. So we might just give it a real brief discussion on what an alignment chart is.
So it's a general moral philosophy. Your alignment chart, there's a number of combinations, but it runs from the line of chaotic and lawful on the two different sides of the spectrum, and then evil and good on the other two sides of the spectrum. And through the center, it crosses through neutral. Basically, you want a combination of two of those. So you want to be chaotic good, neutral evil, lawful good, lawful neutral, whatever. It gives you a general roleplay guideline for how your character would act in society and under some kind of moral or philosophical pressure.
And it was even like a really big part of it, especially previous editions, like if you were playing like a divine sort of class, like a paladin or a cleric, it was actually quite important for you to be quite lawful good, and your role play and the actions that you take in game could actually end up altering or affecting your alignment, which then ultimately alters and affects your spells and your skills and
all that kind of stuff.
It's not as important in this edition of 5th edition, but just something to keep in mind, even for all the aspiring dungeon masters out there. If you're seeing your lawful good player doing some pretty questionable, chaotic, evil stuff, maybe punish them. Maybe
or just remind them.
Yeah,
it's important so you can use alignment as like a tool or a compass or an aligning tool to map how your character would react. Yeah. If you don't know, you're not technically them, so how would they react in this situation? Just kind of like look at your alignment and be like, okay, well this is a general guideline, I'll follow that road down that path,
That's right, yeah. It can really even help with character arcs and stuff that you mightn't have even thought about. So what do you think? Do you think this guy's a good guy? Or do you think he's a bit evil?
I think he's good or neutral, probably in that general domain.
Yeah, I think especially being in an artisan guild where they are doing a lot of drinking and a lot of maybe making some bad choices. They could be maybe regarded as a little bit chaotic.
Oh yeah, I think chaotic's strong.
Chaotic's good, yeah. So what do you think about maybe even chaotic good?
I think chaotic's good's great. Yeah, I think it's.
He means well, but he's a little bit rough around the edges.
Yeah, absolutely.
He still does what he really wants
He's
to
a
do.
wild child still, you know.
And you don't have to write the entire chaotic good. You can just represent that with a CG, or if you're lawful good, LG, lawful evil, LE, examples, etc., etc. And right at the very bottom here, we've got experience points. So there's a couple of different ways of running that as a dungeon master, which we'll get into a lot more deeper in other videos. But you can go with experience points for each thing that you do, each monster that you kill, each thing that you get past, or what generally I've always done with most of my games is more milestone experience. So after you've done a whole bunch of stuff, if I, as the game master, think that you're worthy of a level up after doing all that stuff, I'll just give you the level up.
Yeah.
And I think it keeps it a little bit more simple.
Clean up for sure.
Yeah, but for all those math nerds out there, that's going to be your favourite bit. Now we've got the general idea of who this guy is. Now we're going to come through and probably do our stats next.
Yeah, I think stats are next.
So basically, to reiterate those stats that we rolled earlier, we've got a 12, a 6, an 11, a 16, a 13, and a 14. And a really cool handy tip, especially if you're new to this game, is if you go to the class that you're going to be playing, in this case a barbarian, you can go straight over to this little subheader that says quick build, and it'll tell you roughly what you need to be optimal in this class.
Yep.
And it'll tell you like, your main ability score should be play strength, followed with constitution. Again, you don't have to do this, but this is a great little guide for people who are new to character concepts and character builds.
Yep.
In saying that, I think it's probably advantageous to put our biggest one into our strength.
Agreed. Yeah, I think our 16 should go straight into strength. It gives him quite a bit of force behind him. Yeah,
beefy boy.
Yeah, he can carry a whole barrel of ale if he wants.
That's it, yes. If the mule gets tired, he just takes over. So we've popped our 16 in that top one. And if we go to our quick build, it says smart second choice is probably going to be constitution, which will reflect in your health, your hit points. Also just how generally hardy you are, how much ale you can handle. So I'm assuming this guy's probably got a decent constitution.
Yeah, I think so too. I think our next highest is a 14. I think I go straight into constitution.
14. Basically anything from here on out is almost free range to a certain degree, keeping the flavour of your character concept in mind while you're doing this. Do we think he's going to be pretty quick on his feet, or do you think he's going to be more of a stand there and take punches and go toe to toe and just swing back?
Yeah, I think honestly, I don't think this guy moves all that much. I think he plants himself and then he's there for a while. So frankly, I think it'd be interesting to put the 6 straight into dexterity.
Oh yeah.
It's not a common thing to put your negative trait into your physical scores because that directly affects your combat ability, but it could be fun.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty, so we're going to pop that 6 straight into dexterity. He's not the most agile of dwarves. And even with that, you can even change your character concept ideas loosely as you're going. I mean, Rogren might even be quite an aged dwarf. You know, he's still got that granddad strength that can open any jar in the pantry.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
He's just not as quick on his feet anymore. He's starting to lose a little bit of that sort of haste and that swiftness about him. So we'll also just cross these off as we're going, just so we don't accidentally end up putting the same stat into something twice. Is he going to be intelligent, wisdom, or wise, or is he going to be a very likable guy? I think maybe being a bit older, he might be a bit wiser.
I think the next highest, the 13, I think I can go into wisdom. I think he's probably older, more wise.
He's been around the block.
Yeah. He knows what's going on.
He's had an ale or two.
Yeah.
He's seen some stuff. I mean, there's not a lot in it. We've got a 12 and an 11. Are we going to make him slightly more likable or slightly more intelligent?
Oh, I wish I could go for less on both, but honestly, I think he's more likely to be a little bit more intelligent. He's learned at his craft, and he's a capable individual.
Yeah, quite skilled, like a lot of granddads.
And like a lot of granddads, the kind of cranky old man vibe can come through on the 11 charisma there.
That's right. He might have been more charismatic, but he's just getting a bit over it.
Yeah, honestly.
These numbers might also change slightly depending on the race that you choose and your background. So they might plus or negative some of your stats. So always good to always use one of these ones. Don't use anything permanent because you're going to be doing a lot of rubbing out, a lot of rewriting and stuff like that. So pencil's the way to go.
So one other thing that predicates your ability scores is your starting race. The dwarves are particularly hardy, and their racial trait increases their constitution score by 2 points.
So what you do, well, we've got that constitution at 14, 16, so he's instantly can already handle way more ale just from being a dwarf.
Perfect.
And you've also, when you're reading through a lot of these things, I highly recommend giving a bit of a, even at least a bit of a glance over each of these different races, because you'll have sub-races within the race. So to use our dwarf as an example, you've got hill dwarves and mountain dwarves. And the biggest difference is basically hill dwarves are a little bit more wise, as opposed to mountain dwarves who are naturally a little bit more strong. And it can min-max just a little bit. You only get an ability increase with your even numbers. So we've got a 16, so bumping that up to a 17 mightn't be all that advantageous, even though we could slowly start creeping up to that and get more stats on that later. Or we can pop that straight into wisdom, straight up, and make him a hill dwarf, and that'll give it a 14, which will add more to our modifier.
I like the idea of increasing the wisdom up to 14. I think he is reasonably wise.
And we've sort of made that bit of a concept in our heads. He's a bit of an older dude, so wisdom makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 16, mind you, is definitely no pushover. And those stats are already looking a hell of a lot nicer. So I've just mentioned the ability modifier, and you'll notice that they've got these little circles below our stats. And Julian, do you want to explain how that ability modifier stacks and what exactly it is?
So each of these ability scores represents your character's ability with those various attributes. For every 2 points after 10, you get a +1 bonus, or for every 2 points under 10, you get a -1 bonus in that stat. What these do is, when you have to roll a dice to interact with the world, it comes under one of these or one of these, and you're directly using this bonus.
So with a 16, if we're going to be adding a +1 to every 2 from 10, that will end up being a +3. And then a 6, that'll be a -2, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Awesome, so we're just going to come through and fill all those out, and then you can see exactly how that's looking. Because we actually only have one odd number, you can see what we mean by that. Seeing as it's only +1 above 10, you don't get any increases. And that's what I was talking about with our wisdom before being a 13. So if that stayed at a 13, it'd only be a +1. But because we bumped that up being a hill dwarf, we actually get a +2. So now we've done our stats and everything, and we've understood all of our modifiers and all that stuff, we're going to go straight over to our proficiency bonus. We're not going to worry about inspiration just yet, that's more of an in-game mechanic. So our proficiency bonus is found by going to our class, in this case a barbarian, and you'll actually have a little table on there which will tell you all the different features that you have, the amount of spells if you're a spellcaster, and also your proficiency bonus. So at first level a barbarian gets a +2. So just put a number 2 down in this little circle here.
So your character's reasonably experienced. You've got to assume that he's had some breadth of experience and has done things before in his life.
A little bit more experience than your commoner or your
than your commoner. He's about to embark on being an adventurer, and frankly that takes some experience and wisdom. So what this represents, this proficiency bonus here, is things that he's inherently good at. It's predicated by your class because that's the main thing that you're good at, and as a barbarian, his proficiency bonus will be applied to various barbarian-esque things, such as his saving throws and whatnot. But it's in combination with these ability scores that you work out your skills and your saving throws.
And in this case, you can also find that on the barbarian page of your player's handbook in this case, and he actually is proficient with strength and constitution. So to do that, you just come through and you just put you just colour in the little circles next to the ones that you're proficient with. And you'll notice they've also got a little space here. You can also put your ability modifiers in there if you'd like to as well.
Yeah. In addition, the ones that you've coloured in can get the proficiency bonus as well.
That's right. So we might do that just so you can see what that looks like, and it'll make more sense. So with our strength, because we're proficient in that, you'll get your +3 plus your 2 proficiency bonus, which is a +5. So now that you can see that we've filled that out, it probably makes a lot more sense. Because we have a +3 to our strength, but we're proficient in it, we get to add our +2, which is why it's +5, as opposed to, say, our wisdom, which only gets the +2 because we're not proficient with it. Beautiful.
And as you can see, our dexterity saving throw is a -2. That means we're far more likely to be hit by area of effect effects and various different reaction-based.
Not good at getting out of the way.
Not even remotely.
And probably not good at like any kind of dexterity-based things, whether it's using a finesse weapon, like ranged weapons are usually based off your dexterity,
Yeah.
and also some, I guess, finer blades like rapiers and scimitars and daggers and stuff can be a little bit more based off your dexterity.
Yeah.
But he's a barbarian. He's going to have a big axe or a big sword,
Yeah,
or a big
something like that,
warhammer,
yeah.
or something that you don't.
And I think it's probably appropriate that he probably can't aim very well with projectiles, being almost permanently drunk anyway.
Yes, exactly. I like that. So now that we have our saving throws sorted, we're going to jump straight over to our skills. Usually we'd probably start with our class, and on that same page where we've got all of our other information for there, you'll look right down to the bottom corner. It says skills. You get to choose 2 from animal handling, athletics, intimidation, nature, perception, and survival. It's always good to make these flavorful for the character.
Yeah.
We're kind of making this old, grumpy, drunken, artisan dwarf guy. So what do you think you'd be most... I feel like he wouldn't be very much an animal person.
I don't think he's an animal person whatsoever.
I don't think he'd kick a dog that's just sitting there, but I don't think he'd go out of his way to pet a dog either.
Yeah, unless it came to him, maybe.
We could even say something like athletics, because he is got that granddad
He's used
strength.
to lifting things,
Yeah.
carrying heavy loads, that kind of stuff. Now, you could argue, I suppose, that athletics is oftenly referred to as how efficient you are at running. This guy doesn't run, but he definitely lifts.
He lifts, yeah. Does not miss leg day.
Never.
I sort of feel a bit the same with nature. I feel like he's more about being in the workshop or the pub. He's
He's not
very
interested
rarely.
in trees. Frankly, doesn't go outside all that often anyway.
Yeah, and as a result, probably doesn't really need to learn how to be a survivor either.
Yeah.
Because he's got all his guild artisan mates. Probably one of them makes brisket and he trades beer for that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, he makes his way through other means, not through survival. So what do you think about maybe, I think athletics seems like an obvious one.
Yeah, and I'm thinking intimidation is a nice second here.
Yeah, grumpy granddad.
Yeah.
100%. We've all come across those blokes.
Yep.
So what you do is then you come through, and same as what we've done with our saving throws, we're just going to come through and we're going to colour in the little section that we're proficient with. So again, we've decided to go with athletics and also intimidation. And all of these ones down here are all based off of strength, dexterity, constitution, etc. Some character sheets will have what that class feature is. If you're new to the game, I highly recommend trying to find one of those character sheets. Otherwise, you can find it in your player's
You
handbook.
just go to the skills chapter and then just read through each one, see what it's referencing.
That's right. It's a little bit more time consuming, but all the information's there. So to add a few more of our proficient skills, you also want to go back to your background. So again, we've chosen Guild Artisan, and you can go down there and you can see that you instantly just get insight and persuasion. Probably being good at sales, you can read people really well, and you're probably good at being able to convince them to buy your wares.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense for our guy as well.
I think so.
Even though he's a bit grumpy, when it comes to selling his wares, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Comes across as more of a skilled expertise thing rather than him being charismatic, as you can see from his ability scores.
That's right. So you also get a couple of bits and pieces as well with your background and your class. So one thing you get is a type of artisan tools. I almost don't mind the idea of tinkers, pewterers, and casters.
I like that,
You could be casting these tankarts and mugs and stuff like that.
Yeah, that works.
Because to a degree, I feel like even the brewery and the smithing trope is almost too much of a trope for dwarves, to a degree.
Yeah, I like the idea of him creating like mugs and stuff like that. Or
maybe-
even like an idea about his like weapon or something like that. It's mug themed or something like that.
Yes, totally. Or a warhammer that is a giant mug.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also, it might even add to why he's a little bit grumpy and stuff like that, because dwarves are famous for their smithing abilities.
Yeah.
And he's a caster. So, we're going to pop that straight into our bottom little corner here, which is below our stats and our skills. We're going to pop that right in here.
So tool proficiency for casting. It's basically an amalgamation or ambiguous pile of objects, maybe a mold, some like various materials that are in their base. Comes in a little briefcase or a bag or a box or something like that, and it's just kind of a...
And it is one of those things too, it's, even though we're saying how a lot of the times this is more building flavour than building like your character up to be stronger or more powerful, but it's such a joy when these random little pieces become a poignant part of the story.
Yeah, it's great, yeah.
Like they might have to try and get a copy of like a dagger that's really rare so they can fake it to, hand over to the king, but they want to keep the original. It's like, oh, well, I've got a casting kit, we can just make a fake one.
Yeah, we just do an exact mold, figure that out, and like...
Because he's not really overly lawful, he's a bit more chaotic, it's something he might do.
Oh, absolutely. It's important to remember, not all of this is about being good in combat. D&D is also about role-playing and figuring out kind of a story and a narrative.
That's right, yeah. And you'll quickly find out what your table play leans into a lot more,
Yeah.
or if it's a little bit of a mixture of everything. Yeah. So another thing that we almost should have mentioned at the start of this episode is you will be flipping back between your race, class, and backgrounds a little bit. So the reason why I mentioned that is we're going to be going to languages and all these other things that we see in this bottom little corner here, and our other proficiencies. Another good reason why we've gone with this one is dwarves are also already proficient in brewing and also smithing. So that's kind of worked out perfectly. And even above languages, you can also see that most races also have like other little features.
Yeah, racial features. Yeah.
Racial features, yeah. So for this example, we've got stone cutting. So a lot of dwarfs, because they live in the ground in the mountains and they're usually mining and smithing and all this, it's almost culturally ingrained in their society to know so much about rocks and the earth and basically geology. Speed. So we've got a little box here that says speed. Dwarfs, because they're a little bit more stout, 25 into speed. You can write down all of your different racial abilities. So they have dark vision, which means you can see in the dark a lot better than people who don't. Dwarven resilience, which means you have advantages on like poisons and stuff like that. Dwarven combat training, so all dwarves are proficient with battle axes and warhammers and all those things that you can probably already picture as a bit of a trope with dwarves in a lot of high fantasy. That's also where we found our tool proficiency, stone cutting, and then we'll go into languages after we've filled a few of these out.
Yep.
And when you're filling them out into your page, you can pop them down into either your proficiencies or your features. We usually like to put them in features and traits.
Yeah.
And what I like to do is, instead of writing down all of this stuff, because you'll realize very quickly that there's not enough room for everything on these character sheets.
And you don't want a repetitive strain injury in your hand while you're trying to write down all of the...
We don't want any RSI because of D&D. So what I usually like to do is just put down the header of each of them and then just the page number in the book. So I'll pop that down in there and show you exactly what we mean. Then you can go straight back to your barbarians part of the player's handbook, and you'll also have some class features as well as your race features. So on that same little table that we had our proficiency modifier on, you've got also your features. And if you want to do a deeper read on those things, I've got all of that in the book as well. So we're just going to go ahead and do that now. Beautiful. So we've got rage and unarmored defense. And then we can go ahead and do the same thing as what we've done up here with our page number.
I think the next stage here is we've got to basically move on to skills, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so we've got our attributes. So our skills are made up of our attributes and our proficiency modifier, as well as any additional effects from our features. So now that we've got all of those down, we can move on to the skills.
Awesome. So now you can see that we've filled all these out. So anything that's a dexterity based one has got a -2 because that's our dexterity. And so you're adding these little ability modifiers to each skill. And if it's something you're proficient in, which is colored in, you add your proficiency bonus, which is +2.
In addition to our skills that we've outlined down here, one of these skills has a trait attached to it, and that's stone cunning. What that does is when you're rolling a knowledge history check for the origins of stonework, because he's a dwarf, he gets a bonus to it. Double his proficiency bonus, which would be 4. But that's only on stonework. So other history checks aren't going to reference that. So what I like to do is put a little asterisk next to the history check, and that basically says, hey, look me up. There's something else going on here. And if you want, you can go put the asterisk next to stone cunning so that you know that it's skill related. And then whenever you go to roll a history, you look at that and you go, there's something there. I think we'll have a look at that.
So now that we've got our skills all sorted, I guess we'll be moving over to hit dice.
Yeah, hit dice sound good. So there's a couple of conflating terms here. So first of all, hit dice is both tracks with your level, your class level, and it's referenced by your class. So barbarians are the meaty and the massive D12 hit dice.
Oh yeah!
The big one. This is a personal favorite. I think it's a personal favorite for a lot of people. It's the closest thing you get to roll a D20 for, but what that is basically you have a pool of resources called hit dice that you get to use at short rests as a resource to heal back between fights. Right? If you don't want to take a long rest, you don't want to spend a couple of hours, you just want to sit down for a little bit and kind of relax, you get to use that resource to heal that dice worth of health between fights. So that's represented by how many hit dice you have here. As a barbarian, you're level 1, so you have exactly 1 hit dice, and it's a D12, so we'll just write that in. This also is the same dice that we use to roll for health. Now at level 1 we get maximum health. Health on D12, maximum is 12. In addition to that, we add our Constitution modifier to all of our health rolls. Again, at first level you get the maximum numbers, you get 12 and then 3 from your Constitution, bringing that up to 15. In addition to all of this, as a dwarf with dwarven toughness, we get 1 bonus health. So we'll be hitting 16 health at first level.
Boom!
That's nigh unkillable.
That's
as far
a
as I'm
beefy
concerned.
boy. Yeah. So then you can come through over to here with your current hit points and just write a little 16 up there. And that's just something for you to reference so that you know your maximum hit points.
Yeah. And when you lose hit points in the game, just write your new hit point total below it, because otherwise you might rub this out to replace it with a new number, and then you'll forget what your maximum is.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that.
So you can even leave like a circle around.
Yeah,
that
that's
one.
good. You can.
Yeah, and that way you know that's not the one you rub out. That's my actual health.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So now that we've done the hit points, what's the next spot that we're moving on to?
Oh, we got initiative up the top here, and initiative is the value that we use to decide the order of combat. Initiative is rolled with a d20 and you add your initiative bonus. Now, as a not so dexterous dwarf, we're not going to be moving very fast. The initiative is based off our dexterity modifier and any modifiers to initiative we have in features, which we don't. So in initiative here, we're going to be putting a -2, which means on average he's going to be going considerably slower than anyone else.
Yes, he's a little bit slow going into
Yeah.
battle. Once he's there, he's formidable.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, we're probably going to move straight on to. Is there anything else we need to do before we start buying some equipment or getting our equipment from our background?
Ooh, let's have a look. In D&D, a lot of things happen at a lot of times. It's a simulation of the real world, and you can't be rolling perception checks to eyeball absolutely everything at all times. So what happens is you have a thing called passive perception. It's based off your passive wisdom. And what that is it's 10 plus your wisdom bonus, which is effectively your perception. Unless, of course, you've got perception proficient, which you don't. What this is a 12. And what that means is throughout the course of the game, the GM will look at that, and if anything ever rolls or is referenced as a 12 or less in being stealth or being noticed or something like that, then he will automatically tell you during the course of the game.
Yeah.
You won't have to be prompted for a roll, and you'll just see it straight away. For the most part, the ability to identify the world around you is probably somewhere in the low, like 3 or 4 or something like that. Yeah, but general perception of reality. And then above 10, you're keener than the average eye.
Yeah, especially someone who's used to getting into battles and going on
Yeah,
adventures
yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, and now for the equipment.
Equipment, yeah. So there's a couple of different ways of going about this. Some DMs will give you like a base amount of gold, or you'll get a base amount of gold based off your class. But if we go back to our backgrounds, which again we're a guild artisan, that'll actually give you a little bit of a kit of the things that you can start off with. And in the sort of spirit of keeping things simple, especially for new players, we're just going to go straight up with something like that. So we'll go back to our page 132, Guild Artisan on our backgrounds, and they basically start with a set of artisan tools, one of your choice, which we chose earlier. We've decided that we're going to be doing casting and stuff like that. We also get
A letter of introduction from your guild, a set of traveler's gold, and a pouch containing 15 gold pieces. You see they've got the little blank spaces here. Typically, D&D works as like a copper, silver, gold, platinum, and this is
something more valuable than platinum.
More valuable than platinum.
Arcane currency.
At this point, trust me, you're not kind of getting into the end bracket at level 1, so
At least for a while.
you're just interested with the copper, the silver, and the gold. And usually we work top down. It tends to be 100 copper pieces makes a silver, 100 silver pieces makes a gold, 100 gold makes whatever the next one is.
So we're also proficient with a few different things as well, being a barbarian. We can wear light and medium armor, and we're also proficient with shields, simple weapons, martial weapons. That's about it. That's all you really need as a barbarian.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at putting in our proficiencies from our race. Dwarven combat training. So you're proficient with battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and war hammer.
Cool.
Axes and hammers.
Yeah. Now we could just shorthand that with dwarven combat training.
Yeah.
And then put the page number in.
Sort of like what we've done earlier. And as a barbarian, we're also going to be proficient with light armor, and medium armor, and shields. And then with our weapons, we're actually going to be proficient with simple weapons and martial weapons. And this will all make sense when we go shopping and we go to buy our gear and stuff like that.
Yes.
Some things you just don't know how to use, some things you do.
And these are in addition to what we get from Dwarven combat training, which are those spread of 4 different dwarf-styled weapons.
Hammers and axes.
You get some starting equipment from your barbarian before we go and buy any. So on the next page, you've got a couple of different choices depending on what you want to do. So you start with all of this equipment, as well as anything that you've gotten from your background. You get to choose the first slot between a great axe or any martial melee weapon. You get to choose from the second slot 2 hand axes or any simple weapon. And the last one gives you an explorer's pack and 4 javelins as well.
Well, I think I really love the idea of having this giant sort of tankard or mug warhammer thing going
I like
on.
the idea of having like a warhammer or something like that. So I think we choose B in the first row there and go for any martial melee weapon.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Pick up a warhammer for that one.
Yeah, and that's pretty much all you get with a barbarian. I mean, that's the great thing about, especially if you're new to the game, barbarians are a really cool class because not only are they heaps of fun, they deal heaps of damage, so you'll feel like a rock star in game. But even the character creation side of things is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they're clean. Yeah,
that's right. And not to discourage anybody from wanting to make a spellcaster or something early on. It just takes just a little bit more time, a little bit more effort.
Yeah.
But everything's doable.
I guess we could have a look at the simple melee weapon chart.
See if
we
anything
just
pops
bank
up.
with that when we're buying equipment here. We can just remember we get a free simple melee.
Yeah. And is there anything else we need to be looking at before we jump straight into equipment then?
Nope, straight into equipment now.
Oh, mate, you can tell I've been excited about jumping into equipment. I think I've asked that 4 times now. Are we buying equipment yet? Are we buying equipment yet?
It's the best part.
Oh, who doesn't love shopping? Alrighty, so it'll be page 143 is where the equipment starts. And you can also see there's a couple more tables there saying what kind of amount of gold that people start with if you don't want to go with the initial given one that's in your classes and stuff, or your backgrounds.
So our free simple melee weapon was in this bracket here, and our free martial weapon was in this bracket here.
Awesome. I might even just pop Warhammer down straight up.
I think Warhammer's good.
And we're going to pop that into attacks and spellcasting.
Yep.
And that way we can also just go straight across that table. It'll say how much it costs, what damage it does, the weight of it, and its properties. And you'll see at the very end it says versatile 1d10. Do you want to explain what that means as well for the audience, Julian?
Yeah, so Warhammer's got a printed damage dice of a d8, which means when you hit with it in combat, you get to roll a d8 and then add your strength and any other damage modifiers. When you're using it versatile, it means it's got a longer haft than most weapons. You can actually hold it two-handed, and holding it two-handed means it hits harder. So instead of rolling that d8 when you hit, if it's two-handed, you roll a d10.
And to shorthand that, I've basically written Warhammer, 1d8, B for bludgeoning, and then V for versatile, 1d10. And if you want to make that even more sort of easier for you to reference, you can always put 149 is the page that we're on at the end of that.
Yep.
Just in case you're unsure. More references, the better. We also need a simple weapon. What do you think his other weapon should be?
Well, he's already got the javelins for ranged, so I feel like you go for something within the same wheelhouse. I'm thinking a light hammer or a mace.
Oh yeah, nice.
He's all about that bludgeoning.
Yes, hell yeah. And maybe something that is also a tool, maybe something he uses for his casting. Or...
Yeah, the hammer sounds good.
Yeah. He can just be all hammers and ale.
Yeah, hammers and ale.
He's getting hammered while he's swinging hammers.
The brackets there, the 20 and the 60, means if you throw it within 20, no penalty. You throw it beyond 20, but up to a maximum of 60, you're getting disadvantage on the attack. It means it's a lot harder to throw.
Yeah, the further you throw it, the harder it's going to be to hit.
Javelins have the same thing. I don't know if we want to write javelins in the attacks as well, seeing as they're technically a weapon.
Seeing as we already have for the other ones, we're going to hang on to that 15 gold for when we start the game.
Yep.
You know, if we're going to have to pay for seafaring or lodging.
Absolutely. You want to keep a handy amount of cash on you. And you remember, in the Explorer's Pack, we've got a whole pile of useful stuff. We'll just have a look at that, make sure there's nothing we're missing. Yeah, so the Explorer's Pack basically brings everything you need in a nice little neat package. And so it comes with a backpack, a bedroll, mess kit, tinderbox, 10 torches, 10 rations, and a water skin. It's also got a pack of 50 feet hempen rope strapped to the side of it. This is
super handy.
You're all in. I'm an adventurer. I'm going on an adventure kit.
And while we're there, I've put 151, which is the page number that's on, just in case you forget in-game.
Yeah, and that way you don't have to write down absolutely everything in the pack. You just write down the Explorer's pack and you can reference that page.
Beautiful.
Write down anything you use, of course.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. That's basically all of the mechanics for your character. Anything sort of here on in is basically going to be flavor. So we're talking about like their background and ideals, bonds, traits, flaws, all that kind of stuff. And on the next page we've also got like what they look like and their height and their weight. And usually a lot of these character sheets are 3 pages, with the last page being spells. So this is probably one of a few characters where it's almost not applicable, at least for the first few levels. So we're not going to worry about spells today, but don't worry, we're going to be doing Spellcaster in the next coming videos.
Fantastic. Alright, so we'll start going through these little personality traits. So what these are basically dimensions that tell you how your character is going to act. They're kind of guidelines again. Remember, it is your character. But similar to alignment, like we discussed earlier, they give a guideline to what your character would probably do in a lot of these situations.
And the cool thing is, like, each different background has its own series of tables. So just say you either don't have the time to come up with all this stuff, or you're just not one for creative writing and you just rather get in there and start playing.
Sometimes it can be fun too. It's like opening a random pack of character personality traits.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right.
You get some interesting mixes that aren't conventional.
And things that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Yeah.
And there's a decent amount to choose from. Like one of the first ones, the personality trait, you got 8 different options. But it's also on a D8 system, so you can completely randomize all this. Again, like what Julian's saying, if you want to almost not know what you're in for, and just come into a game with a cool new character and you're basically working it out when you're reading the sheet, that's also a cool way of doing it.
Yeah, so remember that you don't have to fill in one of the 8 traits from the personality traits table. You can make your own. If you want to make yours straight from scratch, he's got a super unique concepts, then you can just write in anything you want as long as it fits the general theme of these 4 concepts.
100% homebrew writing.
Yeah.
So, one thing we're doing while we're filling out all of our personality traits and ideals, flaws and bonds, we also forgot to mention that with your backgrounds, you also might get a feature as well. So do you want to explain what that feature is that you get for a guild artisan?
Yeah, right. So with the guild artisan, you're attached to a guild business. And that's obviously, for this guy, he's part of the Tinkerers, Pewters and Casters group or something like that, where he's making his mugs and selling them through distribution network, etc. But as part of that, you also get the membership. The membership comes with a certain benefits and a slight offset. Now, first of all, you have to pay 5 gold per month to the guild. Now, I think at the start of character creation, it's assumed you've already paid your 5 gold for that month.
Out of 15.
Unless the DM is really hard on you about it, and he's like, all right, take that 5 out of that 15, there you're gone. What the guild gives you is they wield tremendous political power. So at certain points, you can use this as a character hook or a backstory involving your GM, and basically use it to gain political power, meet with an important person, maybe get some lodgings or like a safety net or something like that. Something pretty big that you wouldn't conventionally be able to.
With like a noble or something
Yeah,
like that,
exactly.
which you wouldn't otherwise
Something like that.
have a chance to.
Yeah. You find these things, they're just kind of like a roleplay benefit, basically, that you're paying gold towards.
And even for all the Dungeon Masters or Game Masters out there, it's amazing how these little tiny things can almost start like a little sort of adventure that ends up being a major plot hook. And so, all these little things
This
are worthwhile.
This established guild network could be something that gets developed down the line quite a bit. Maybe something gets in peril, or they need certain things.
Gets corrupted.
That's interesting. That kind of stuff, you know. And in addition to that, they'll also like feed and house you for free, well, the 5 gold.
5 gold. It might be some nice accommodation.
Right. But they'll feed and house you, and maybe some people you're with, depending on how difficult they are. And
or even if you're in a bit of trouble, it could even be some form of a safe house, because these are people that you know and trust, as opposed to coming into a city where you don't really know anybody, but because of your networking with being a guild artisan, it's like, hey, I know a guy in the city, we can stay in his basement.
You flash your guild membership card to the teller, and
your receipt for 5 gold.
You printed out, stamped on a piece of stone tablet receipt.
And with all that said and done, we're also going to just quickly talk about our our ideals, bonds and flaws, and our personality traits just before we go back to, we also miss the languages. So we'll go back and we'll do that as well. There might be a little bit of chopping and changing. We've been making characters for probably over a decade each, maybe 20 years combined, and we still chop and change between the book. You have a rough idea of how you're going to do it and a bit of a formula, but there's always something you're going to miss, so don't stress. So we've just taken these straight off of the tables that are in the book. And we've just picked them. We didn't roll for them or anything like that. We've kind of got a bit of a rough idea of who this guy is, who Rorgren Alesmith is. So basically his personality traits is I'm rude to people who lack my commitment to hard work and fair play. So if you're not a hard-working person and if you don't play by the rules, he's not going to really like you.
Yeah, he's kind of like that real hyper-traditional, really interested in that grind set, you know? A long time spent making things that feel authentic and genuine.
And if I did it, then why can't you? So our deals is everyone should be free to pursue his or her own livelihood. So we've kind of also talked about how, you know, dwarves are famous for their smithing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And being a caster and using cast molds and stuff, maybe he's a little bit sort of looked down upon by his fellow kin because he's not smithing, he's not beating steel, he's doing it a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, he's doing like a more niche, maybe a more artsy version of smithing in the casting and molding.
So that gives him a deep understanding of what it's like to be maybe persecuted for being able to, for wanting to pursue something that's not traditional.
Yeah. And so, he's interested in that for everyone. He holds that adage.
Yeah, and just for a bit of fun, I'm actually going to leave the bonds last, even though that's coming up. That's going to be the next one. I'm just going to say that last because it'll throw a bit of a left hook into this character. So our flaws is I'm quick to assume that someone is trying to cheat me.
So I'm basically distrustful. He's probably been in and around the sales system, the marketplace and the enterprise networks for a long time, and he knows there's a lot of sharks out there.
Oh yeah.
He's been burnt before, and he's not going to let it happen again. And this is consistent not just with his business dealings, but with his relationships and people he meets along the way.
And even maybe his bonds, which we've left last. So I pursue wealth to secure someone's love. So just when you thought this was just a grumpy old dude who hates everybody, maybe he's had his heart broken, maybe he's in love with someone who doesn't love him back, but that's something that it'll basically unfold when the game starts.
Yeah, and he's pursuing that within the guild to get networks, to maybe meet or influence someone that might be important to him.
Beautiful. So now that we've got that all covered, we're just going to really quickly jump back to the languages. This is a pretty simple one. Obviously all dwarves speak Dwarven. There's also a massive sort of divide in the community since in recent times they've started calling Elven and Dwarven Elvish and Dwarvish. And that's personal preference. I've always been old school and said I think it even sounds cool, like Dwarven, Elven.
Yeah.
Have you got any takes on that?
I think my take on the Dwarven and Elvish thing is Elvish tends to be is that Dwarven and Elven is a good language, and Elvish and Dwarvish is of dwarf or of language. So to say his Warhammer is Dwarvish, he speaks Dwarven.
I like that.
It's like there's an object involved rather than a literary state.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I'm glad I asked that question.
I like the old school EN too. It's very Tolkien, high fantasy kind of concepts.
But mainly I just see people kind of arguing and bickering about this. But I like how you've kind of adapted the two. There's no reason why there's not enough room in the language to have all these words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they both seem reasonably good. Like if I was talking about something that was dwarvish in nature, I'd be doing that. And I assume dwarves speak Dwarven.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm even going to apply that to my own games.
Yeah.
And on that note, so they obviously speak Dwarven, and it's also very common for everybody to speak Common, because if you can't understand each other, it makes role-playing pretty difficult.
Common's the universal language in D&D, and it's akin to our English effectively in most of the planet. So it's your general communication tool.
Yeah. If you're a German-speaking table and everyone comfortably speaks German, German will be your common.
German is your common, that's it. It's the universal language.
Beautiful. And dwarves get any other extra languages?
No, probably not.
I don't think they do. They're pretty, they like to stick to themselves. Guild Artisan, let's have a look. Languages, one of your choice. Sweet.
So the assumption here is that the guild probably networks or works within either a town that interacts with these speaking people, or in some form accommodates a necessity for that. So during his time within the guild, he's needed to speak something.
And this is something you can also min-max, and probably talk to your DM or your GM about it, because if you're going to be spending a lot of time in Elven settlements, then maybe it's good to be able to speak Elven. But or if you just want to have something completely random, that might also generate an idea for your GM as well. So if you speak Giant or something like that, they're like, oh, I wasn't thinking about throwing any Giants at these guys, but I've all of a sudden got a cool encounter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, what do you think our guy should speak?
Ooh, with languages, well, you can go and find a list of languages in, let's say, skills. Here it is. Okay, you got your standard and your exotic languages. Exotic languages is something that, like we were saying, probably isn't going to be applicable unless the GM makes it applicable. And then your standard languages, you're probably going to run into these, maybe not, depending on the terrain and stuff like that, but they cover your general race and slightly off-race languages like Goblin, Giant, stuff like that.
I've always sort of somewhat thought that, like, famously dwarves and orcs are almost famously enemies, or dwarves and goblins and stuff like that. It could be fun to make it, maybe he's also a bit of an outsider because he is, finds a lot of commonality in orcs and goblins being...
Yeah, they're kind of free-spirited, more independent lifestyle, the tribal kind of design,
Or I'm also thinking, because he does a lot of tinkering and a lot of craftsmanship and stuff like that, another race that's very famous for their tinkering is gnomes. So right. I'd be leaning more towards one of those two.
Yeah, those two sound good to me. I think, I guess... I like the idea of the backstory with the orcs, where he's more akin to that kind of thing. It might fit in with the orc character in your party, like there's sort of like a repertoire there. He's slightly more trusting of you, maybe, and he's already got that issue with trusting people.
And that could also be a fun thing to play around with in-game, where people are usually quick to assume that dwarves won't like orcs, and then every pub he goes to, the first person he wants to chat with is an orc.
Yeah.
And then even the orcs are delightfully surprised.
Yeah, absolutely.
This short little dwarf wants to come over and have a mad chat.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll go with orc.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome.
And they speak orc. Oddly enough, not orcish or orcan.
Yeah, just orc.
But their script is dwarf. So
that even makes sense.
So they write in the same characters. So
maybe he's read a lot of... Maybe he's got a famous folk hero novelist.
He
found out years later as an orc.
Well, it'd be good, I suppose, cross-marketing if he's writing some script in his mugs or something like that, then dwarves are going to be able to read that more or less.
Yeah,
and
at least he feel like a big drinkers too. I just have that feeling.
Definitely.
Drinkers of ale, mead, blood, whatever.
Whatever you're into.
Alright, so I'm pretty sure that's everything on our first page.
Yeah, I think so.
Beautiful. So that's what you should be looking at by now. It'll just look like an absolute mess of scribbles if you're anything like me and Julian. But again, even if you want to get a rough draft of this down so you've got the whole concept down, you can always make another character sheet that looks way prettier and all that kind of stuff. It's entirely up to you.
We haven't done armor.
Oh, armor. Yes, sorry, our armor class. This is probably something we should have done earlier on, but sometimes you want to leave it till after you've done your shopping
you need
and stuff like
equipment,
that.
that kind of stuff.
And reason being is it's usually affected by your dexterity modifier. And whatever armor you're going to end up using. So Rogren's actually proficient in simple armor and also medium armor.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, because he can't move real quick, he's probably going to need the biggest armor that barbarians are willing to wear.
Yeah, true. Barbarians get an ability called
Unarmored defense.
Unarmored defense. So what unarmored defense does is, when you're not wearing any armor, your armor class equals 10 plus your dexterity plus your constitution. So it's nice offset here for having a negative dexterity that we get to add our constitution, which is, a 3. So that'll bring it up to
11.
11.
You got to hit first.
Yeah, you definitely want to hit first.
So after a little bit of deliberation, we've just double checked. So we've actually worked out the best armor that this dwarf can wear is none at all, because he gets that slight bump with his constitution, like what Julian was saying.
Yeah.
Whereas the only thing we can afford is hide armor, which will only give us a base +2. It'll give us 12.
It'll give us 12, and with no armor, he's got 11, and quite frankly, that's 10 gold we don't have to spend.
That's right. So we're going to go straight up to our armor class, which is really easy to see. It's a little shield, looks like armor.
Yeah.
And we're going to put a 11.
Yeah. And so what that means is, whenever an enemy is attempting to hit us, they're rolling a d20 with their attack roll and adding whatever bonus, and they have to equal or exceed our armor class rating.
So you have almost a 50% chance of hitting this guy.
It's great.
Alrighty, so again, 3 pages of this sheet. We can almost do away with this one. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek for when we do a caster, but we're not going to need that for this character just yet, until he levels up, maybe. So, on our second page, this is more of how our character looks, the appearance and all that kind of stuff. Some people just like to go online and create like an AI-generated art form, or just Google images, something that looks pretty close to how you look, and just stick it on there.
Yep.
Yeah, which I actually recommend unless you are a bit artistic and you want to draw a picture or something like that. But for the sake of simplicity, and because this is mainly audio with a little bit of visual, we're just going to talk about roughly what he looks like.
Yeah.
So, what age? We've decided he's going to be pretty old.
I think he's like in the cranky era, so
Yeah.
the dwarf age tells you their general age bracket. Most dwarves start adventuring around 50, and they can live up to 350 years old.
Yeah.
That's pretty venerable.
I feel like he'd be at least maybe 200.
I think he's in his 200s.
Yeah.
You know, he's past his midlife crisis, and he's entering into his final stage of, oh man.
Still got a bit of fight in him.
Yeah, I think,
years,
yeah,
maybe.
and maybe it's more ideological. Maybe he's reached this point as an older dwarf and gone, there's things that need to be righted with this world or something like that, and I'm running out of time, you know?
100%. So do you reckon with that maybe 250?
250 sounds good. He's
Cool.
on his last breath of 100 years.
Only 100 years.
Only 100 years.
Rough.
Yeah.
Height, and again, it has all these sort of recommendations in the player's handbook, but dwarves are basically anywhere from about, 4 foot to 5. Not
Yeah,
even.
yeah, it's
maybe
like-
3.5 to 4.5.
Yeah, probably around 4, I'd say. Like late 3s, 4, and then up to like 5.
Yeah, that's a big dwarf.
They don't seem to be a huge spread. They're all kind of around the same height. It's not too bad.
So we're just going to maybe 4 foot.
4 foot sounds good.
It's not overly tall, not overly short. He's just kind of average height.
Yep.
But
Taller than a gnome, and that's all that matters.
But I reckon with that beefy strength and that decent constitution, he's probably going to be a pretty hefty fella. A pretty stout kind of bloke.
I think his weight's pretty high. Now, this is traditionally used in Imperial system,
Yeah.
so we're going to be using pounds here.
Which is great because we live in Australia where we don't use pounds very often for anything.
Yeah, yeah.
But how much do you think you'd weigh? I might leave this up to you because I'm terrible at trying to convert kilograms to pounds.
200 pounds.
200 pounds, done. 200.
Right now.
And us Australians also find the LBS hilarious for the term pounds. If anybody knows why it's LBS, please pop that down in the comments. And what about his eye colour?
Eye color. I think you were going for like the typical grey.
Grey, I was thinking something a bit piercing.
Like you look at him, you're like, ooh, okay.
So, skin tone. It's funny, we actually lost a little bit of footage as we do. As you can tell, we're working things out as we go on this channel. But we came up with an idea of dwarven forge tan.
Yeah.
So they spend most of their time indoors, or at least under the ground or something like that. But they're always surrounded by forges and flames and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, dwarven forge tan.
Yeah, so it's like a pale orange or something like that. You know?
Mainly on the front.
Yeah.
That's what-
Yeah, exactly. In the parts not covered in hair.
And speaking of which, with his hair, I guess this whole time I've been picturing anything like grey to white.
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely. He's in the later years, but he's not ancient yet. So
Yes.
probably still some grey in there, but more
Salt than pepper?
salt than
yeah,
pepper. I
we
think,
might
yeah.
even write that. More salt than pepper.
Perfect.
Awesome. Beautiful. So basically, that's how you make your first level barbarian character. So I hope you guys have learned something today, and don't worry, we're going to be doing lots and lots of different characters in coming videos, so this is just the first of many. And I'd also just like to really thank Julian for coming on the show today. It's not the first time you're going to see Julian, you're going to see a lot more of him in the next coming videos, so thanks again for coming and joining the channel,
Not a
brother. My
problem.
man, yeah. There's lots and lots of videos out there on YouTube, so I'd just like to thank you all for clicking on this one. It really does mean a lot. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can always jump over to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/Tomi'sGameTable. Thanks again, guys. Have an
Thank
awesome
you.
day.
See you later.
See you next time.